I'm glad you could make it today. We are in the book of First Samuel, starting in chapter 25. And you may recall that in the last lesson, David had just been spared from a major battle with Saul, and Saul had gone to leave him alone. Well, David did not just hang around the area. Uh, he went down into a desert area where he found that there was this guy named Nabal who had thousands of animals, about 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep. So this guy was a rich man, and he was able to make a living in that area. And of course, being a rich man, he had many servants as well as his own family. And that kind of becomes important as we see in the story. Now, David had 600 men following him at this time, and he made sure that his men left Nabal's animals alone. They didn't go in and take a sheep for themselves or pick up a goat here and there. They actually protected those sheep from anything from the outside, whether it might be predators or whether it might be uh, raiding parties from another nation or just thieves in the area who wanted to steal an animal. And so they protected them. They also didn't bother the people who were working and taking care of the animals. And so when it came time for the shearing, which was a, a kind of like a festival or a holiday event, uh, David was thinking, okay, now it may be time for Nabal to kind of pay us back for what we've done for him and the things we haven't done to him. And so he took 10 of his youngest men and sent them down to tell Nabal that, yes, we're with David, and you may notice that we have helped kind of protect your people and your animals, and we would like something in return if you have anything extra. So they went down and made this polite request to Nabal. Now, turns out Nabal was a pretty nasty guy. Now, his wife was completely different. She was a lovely woman, but Nabal, he was mean, and he thought, well, what's mine is mine, and he let these guys know it. He didn't just say no. He went on to insult David. He's going, who's David? He said, there are lots of people who leave the people they're working for and go out on their own. So he's kind of slamming David, saying that, oh, David was working for the king and he left his job. So what kind of a guy is this? He's insulting David. Well, these 10 men, young men, leave empty-handed, and they go back to David and they tell him what has happened. Well, David is furious, and he tells the men to strap on their swords, and he leaves 200 of them with the supplies that they have and takes another 400, and he starts heading for Nabal's ranch. Okay, meanwhile, one of the servants who had seen all of this go on went to Nabal's wife, Abigail, and tells her what had happened. Well, she is terrified because she realizes what's going to happen or what could very well happen. So she immediately throws together a good amount of food, not enough for 600 men, but a good amount of food anyway, puts them on donkeys and sends them on ahead of her. And then she follows later. And you think, where did all this food come from that she had? Because there was bread, there was pressed fig cakes, there was all kinds of food there. In fact, some of the meat came from 5 sheep, so it's a good bit of meat there that she's sending. Well, you have to remember this is a festival time, it's a time of celebration, and so having this food on hand would have been something they would have already been putting together. No doubt she took what was already available and left the remaining servants to prepare food to continue with the festival. Well, she heads out, I guess catches up with the others. She's not traveling with as much weight. And then when they come across David and his men, she dismounts, she goes up to him, bows down before him, and starts taking the blame herself and says, "Oh, please don't punish uh, everyone with what you intended to do. Please take out your anger on me." Well, David's not going to do that uh, because here it is. She's a woman humbling herself. She's not armed. She wasn't the one who insulted him. And so he calms down a little bit, but mainly what it is that she does is to remind David of who he is and who he's going to be. She knows about him. She knows he's going to be Israel's future king. She may not know that he's already been anointed, but she can see what's happening. And she points out that her husband is a foolish man. And she also says, to David, when you become king one day, don't have this stain on your reputation that could happen. Meaning that if you go in and do what he wants to do, and what he wants to do is pretty harsh. He wants to kill all of the males in Nabal's household. If he does all of that, then that will be something he'll look back on in years and go, I really shouldn't have done that. That was a sin. And in fact, it was a sin for him to even plan to do this. So he finally thanks her for keeping him from doing something that he knew in the long run that he shouldn't do. So he calms down and he accepts the gift of food that she has offered, and he tells her, "You may go in peace. I'm not going to do anything." So she heads back. He stays where he is. Well, Nabal is having a pretty good time at the party, and so she waits until the next morning to tell him that, David was on his way here to kill all of the males that you've got here. And Nabal is terrified at this, and the Bible says his heart fails him and he became like a stone, and that he died 10 days later. So it's entirely possible that he had a heart attack, he may have been struck down by something else, or maybe had a stroke and his heart was still beating, but it was weakened from the fear that happened that led to the stroke. So no matter what happens in all of this, we find that Nabal is soon dead. Well, after that, David marries Abigail, and that does two things. One is that it protects the ownership of the property, and the other, it not only protects her, it makes her safe, but it's, in a sense, a reward for the recognition that she is such a good woman, and he takes her in. So after this, David moves on somewhere else, and there are these people called the Ziphites who live in the area where David goes, and they report back to Saul and said, David is here. Well, now there's a little bit of a problem, because right before all of this happened, Samuel the prophet has died. So there's no longer someone who can talk to Saul and calm him down. And so where we had seen not too long ago, Saul had gone after David and then he decided to leave him alone. Well, now he's turning right back around and headed to get David once more. Well, this time, when Saul's army camps for the night, they're in an open area, and you would think, okay, that would be good. It'd make it easier for the sentries to watch things and see if anyone was coming. But what happens is they fall asleep. We find out later that God puts them into a heavy sleep. Well, David is back talking with his nephews who happen to be with him and says, okay, I'm going to go to Saul. Who wants to go with me? Well, one of his nephews says, I'll go with you. And so the two of them go, and they work their way through the Israelite camp, and they find Saul, and Saul has his spear stuck in the ground, and his army commander is right there close to him. And David's nephew's going, hey, look, God's given him into your hands. Let me take my spear and run it through him. We just kill him right here and be done with it. But again, just like before, David says, no, we can't do this. This is God's anointed. But what we will do is this. And he says, take his spear and his water bottle, and then let's go. And then they go away, and when they do, they get a safe distance away, actually on another hillside, so they can call across there. And David starts calling out to the army commander and says, hey, what are you all doing? You're not even defending your king and preventing someone from coming up and killing him. And the army commander doesn't know who this is, but Saul recognizes David's voice. And he's going, David, is that you? And he's going, yes. He goes, I was able to come into your camp and take your spear and your water bottle, and no one was there to protect you. God gave you into my hands. And I hope this proves that I'm not trying to kill you, because I could have done it. And so Saul is shocked in one sense, but in another, he's kind of grateful to David. And so David says, send one of your young soldiers over here and I'll give him back your stuff. And so they do that and he gives him back. And then Saul takes his army, turns around and leaves. And so this is the part where I'm going to pause in the story, because some big things are about to happen. But the key things to know at this point are that, okay, Samuel has died. Saul is now going to leave David alone, although David doesn't know that for sure at this point. And that David's power is growing more and more as we go along. Okay, the lesson we get from this is that even though we may be following the right path, sometimes we can make poor decisions, and we just need to be in continuous contact with God so that God can allow things to unfold to prevent us or help us see that we're making poor decisions. All right, today's tie, I'm showing the Scarecrow from The Wizard of Oz. And if we remember him from the movie, is that he didn't have a brain. He had a head full of straw. Well, that describes Nabal perfectly, because he sure didn't have much sense when it came to making good decisions, and he paid the price for that. All right, next time we've got a big story coming along, so I hope you'll be here. But until then, you have a great day. Bye.